Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the new installment of Interview with an Exorcist. My name is John Barnwell, and I'm here in the greater Detroit metropolitan area along with Dr. Douglas Gabriel and his remarkable biographical journey. And last week we went into high strangeness, as it's called in ufology, and tried to come to terms with the concepts of the current events in light of the indications of Rudolf Steiner. And although it may not seem so, there are a great many ideas that are a really effective subtext to understand what is going on in the world today. So, how are you, Douglas?
I'm doing great, doing great. We have to have a good, lively show today because we stirred people up last time talking about UFOs. So today we need to try to explain the spiritual side, a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I think that that's really what's needed because people are not they're not accustomed, I believe is the good word. They're not accustomed to thinking of that they're on a day-to-day basis continually surrounded by many beings of which they're unaware because they can't perceive them with their five senses. And when you get into that realm, uh, the technologists and the fans of that tend to call it high strangeness, and that it's uh, inevitable, according to what Rudolf Steiner says, that when you approach the world with the abstract mind, it's attempting to construct ideas based upon the dead corpse-like shadow thinking that we live our daily lives with. And so it's an endeavor within spiritual science to develop that image creating capacity so that one can enter into the realm of moral imagination. And so I think that gives us a kind of a wholesome introduction into this subject.
Yes, and we've talked about this before, and I'll go back and say why this might be relevant for people listening. If you're interested in what an exorcist experiences and or think that you've had experiences like that and or you know people that you believe are obsessed or possessed and you're just trying to get a handle on that, or you're just here for entertainment's sake, it's all the same. The point is that we're all filled with demons. Sorry to have to tell you, but there's what does Christ say? Call no man good except my Father in heaven. There's no good people. Everybody is making mistakes because of our unconsciousness. And so, whether it's in our thinking, our feeling, or our deeds, it doesn't matter. Most of it is unconscious. And John just pointed to that perception itself is really what you are projecting upon the world. And you can see it as heaven or hell, depending upon your own perceptions. So, the real question is when you see a UFO, what is happening? We pointed out to you that it's kind of like a dream. When you're interpreting a dream, you want to say, first off, everything in it is you. Second off, how does it make you feel? Seeing a UFO is kind of like a dream interpretation. In a dream, all the characters are you, unless, of course, you're having a precognitive dream or you're an initiate. And then basically, what you want to do is remember everyone in the dream is you, and you want to know how you felt at the end. How did it make you feel? It wasn't about the details, because as you know, they're sometimes extraordinarily chaotic. Same thing happens with the UFO sighting. As we pointed out in our previous talk, both of us have had multiple UFO sightings. I can't tell you how many I've had because it's absurd. But the question is, I needed to realize that it's like a dream. The whole thing's me. So if I'm seeing a tin can, well, that's because I am projecting upon it the idea that it's a tin can, that it's made of metal, and that there's somebody in it, or that there's a alien in it, or that there's a Nordic alien, or there's a gray alien, or they're this or it's that. What are you actually doing? You're looking in a mirror. And so when an angel comes to visit you, what does that look like? What happened when Mary was visited by the Archangel Gabriel? First off, she smelled lilies, didn't she? Because he was carrying a lily. So as we talked about before, that's one of the reasons if it's a spiritual encounter or a demonic encounter is the smell. And literally, you may think it's absurd. It's not a real smell, but it's a spiritual smell. And it can smell like sulfur. It can smell like hell. Or it could smell like lilies. It could smell like roses. So when an angel would visit St. Jerome in the form of a ball of lightning, a ball of light, he took out his pen and pencil and talked to it. When Mary had a visitation from the Archangel Gabriel, she was given a message from God, and somehow she became impregnated immaculately at that moment. When Joan of Arc met, who was it, St. Michael and Margaret and either Catherine and Anne, anyway, two saints and an archangel, she picked up a sword and went to battle. That's what she thought she was being told. So the question is not whether there are aliens on other worlds, because there are. We talked about that last time. There are beings on Mars that if you hear some of Rudolf Steiner's descriptions of them, you won't believe it. And if you hear Peter Dunov's descriptions of it, you'll go, oh, that's crazy. But if you hear Daskala's description of the beings on Mars, you'll go, okay, that's a sci-fi movie. But these are all initiates, and they're describing what on one level or another you may experience when you have an encounter at the threshold. Now, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? It's either the threshold of mechanical ingenuity to have a human flying these things around, or you're seeing through the veil between our world and the spiritual world, and perhaps you're seeing, you're going up and you're seeing angels, and that's, of course, not quite literal, or you're going down and you're seeing elementals and demons. And so it's going to be up to you to how you perceive that. For instance, let's take what we talked about before. When we used to have Goethean conversations, we followed a certain pattern that had to do with being very sensitive to one another, listening to one another, trying to get out of your selfishness. That was the whole big deal. Can you stop being selfish for a moment and listen to the other person and not just fall asleep and go into what are your own demons, which is doubt, hatred, and fear. Rudolf Steiner says, when you're talking to somebody who's not quite like you, what happens? You go to sleep. I think all women would verify that when they talk to their husband either goes into a dream or dreamless sleep, or they're certainly not listening. And later, they have no idea what the wife said.
Uh-huh.
Okay. What'd you say, hon? Yes, honey, I will. When you didn't hear a word she said, And so what is that? That is natural. When we encounter another being, you go to sleep. Literally, you stop listening to them. Only why? Because you're selfish. If you were selfless, it would wake you up and it'd be the best part of your day listening to what somebody else had to say to you. Because then you would get a chance to let your Christ in nature come through, let your love come through, let your wisdom shine through, and you can help heal that person simply by listening to them. So when a UFO, let's say a UFO shows up over here on the left and there's an angel on the right. Okay, guess what? A materialist is not going to see an angel. They're going to see a tin can. And they're going to do what? They're first going to doubt it, right? Because in the astral body, doubt rises up anytime you have a temptation. And any single time you meet another person, it is a chance to either advance or go backwards. It's a chance to advance good karma, or it's a chance to create some bad karma. So every single encounter is a chance for a spiritual step forward or backward.
And I just want to interject. Rudolf Steiner says, and I say this over and over again, there are no insignificant moments.
Precisely. Every single moment is a chance for the golden moment of illumination. It's literally a chance for the moment of enlightenment, but it usually only comes through other human beings or other encounters with other beings. So let's look at this for a second. Somebody has an encounter, and what do they say? They say, oh, they came to me and they took me up in a spaceship and they did experiments on me. Okay, what is that? Could be an elemental being passing through your body. It could be the consciousness of an alien from another planet passing through your body. It could be experimentation done, like when they would take the cows up and experiment on them, and then put them back on the ground, and they'd be all they'd gone through surgery or dissection and so on and so forth. So what is that? Well, have you ever had an encounter with a person when you're done, you feel like they raped you, or they raped your brain, or they raped your feelings, or they raped your will, they took away your willpower, they ripped you off, they stole your freedom? Well, that's what happens in every possible encounter. So, how do you know the difference between meeting say, an angel, a demon, or a UFO? That pretty much comes down to you, because when the reality is, as the disclosure is going forth in Congress, and they now have one person who comes forward with hearsay and says he saw a body of an alien. Oh yeah, okay, well, I'm waiting for the evidence, and I want to meet an alien, but I've met plenty of angels, and I've met plenty of angels working through people, and archangels working through people, and time spirits, archive working through people. And so every single encounter is really showing you more about yourself than what that person is showing you about themselves, especially if you're not an initiate. So when you encounter somebody, a couple things can happen. You can have doubt arise. Let's say you see a UFO and you go, no, that's not a UFO. There's no aliens in there. No, nobody can do that. It's a light in the sky bump. And you write it off with doubt, right? You meet an angel and you say, oh no, I was hallucinating. It was, it was some fantasy. It was something I ate, whatever, that amazing dancing light. Someone sent me some videos of outside of a building. They're doing spiritual work, and there's these dancing light. And I wrote back, that's an angel. They were like, really? That's what an angel looks like? Yes. It doesn't look like what you think it looks like. It's not going to have any type of physical perception that you would recognize unless you project it onto it. So you meet these beings and you go into doubt. And then you go into, that's the past, because your mind is trying to say, how do I register this? I just saw a troop of angels pass by in the sky right before me, and they didn't have feet, and they were flying along, and they weren't male or female, and they were having a conversation, and the conversation was some lofty thing, and you go, well, was that real? That all depends upon your ability to have morality and the supersensible organs to be able to perceive these beings. But if you have them, then again, what will happen? I just got through asking Michael McKibben, when you see an angel, what's going to happen no matter what? And he said, he thought about it. He goes, I don't know. I said, you drop to the ground in shame and you put your face to the ground. Isn't that what happened to Paul? Isn't that what happened to Mary? Said, I'm not worthy. She put her head. Isn't that what happened to Joan of Arc? Isn't that what happened to everybody who ever encountered one of these things, including UFOs? They usually freak out and they get all weirded out, right? And then what happens? They go into fear. So they're in the past with doubt, and then they jump into the future with fear. And they oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is the UFO going to take me up? They're going to experiment on me. Oh, is the angel going to overwhelm me? What happened when Zeus showed Selene his true form instead of a golden shower of rain coming down upon her? She demanded to see his true form. And he goes, no, I can't show you. She demanded it so many times. He showed her true form. What happened? She died. She couldn't handle it. If you truly saw an angel right now, you'd more than likely pass out, okay? Because of first off, your brain would go into cognitive dysfunction. Same thing when you're doing an exorcism. If you start to see the demon coming through the person, you're going to have fear. There's no doubt about that. You're going to have fear. And you're going to, first off, you're going to doubt it. When you go there, you're going to go, well, I'm not sure this is a possession. We'll have to see. We'll start doing the prayers and we'll see what happens, right? And then when it happens, you go, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid. And then what happens? Then you have the ultimate choice. Are you going to run from it? Are you going to hate it? Are you going to love it and embrace it? It's like when you die, according to even I think some images from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but also certainly from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, in the intermediate realm, you meet 3 demons in the Bardo. What are you going to do when you meet those demons? If you run and you're afraid from them, you're never going to get through them. You'll never get past the first one. But if you meet the first one and you embrace it and say, you are me, I am you, I love you, I embrace you, you'll pass right through it. And you'll go to the second and the third Bardo realms, and you'll meet these 3 demons, the demons of doubt, the demon of fear, the demon of hatred. Now, we've told you before, that's on the path of initiation. That's what happens to everyone when they come to the threshold. Well, that's what happens when you're on the threshold of an exorcism. That's what happens when you're doing a reading for someone and you're on the threshold. You're reading their past. You're looking at them in the present, but they're most interested in the future. You know, they may have some past questions they need resolved, but they want to know the future, because people, even initiates, are afraid of the future. And so Steiner gives us an exercise that we should have no fear about what comes to us from the future. We should be calm. We should accept the future and face these things one at a time instead of blowing them out of proportion. So when you see a UFO, all of a sudden, what happens? You think, there's more of them. And they're from all over. They come from a lot of solar systems, from galaxies. They come from other, oh my God, we're being overran by aliens, right? And then there's aliens among us. And then oh no, there's walk-ins. Oh no, they've taken over the leadership of all the world governments because the walk-ins have come in and the Greys have turned into humans because they actually could. Okay, this is just stupid fear. This is your doubt. And then what happens? You hate them. You hate them. Remember what happened in Star Trek. Zefram Cochrane did an experiment where he did warp speed. He finally attained for humans warp speed. He lands, and then what happens? The Vulcans show up. And they walk off this spaceship, and everyone's in what? Absolute fear and doubt. And they're deciding whether they're going to hate them and kill them, because that's what we do to all aliens. Anything foreign to us, we usually kill first to see if it's going to harm us. That is human nature. We are pathetic creatures in many respects. So the Vulcan comes off and so dramatically takes his hood off and shows his pointy ears. And then all of a sudden they go, oh my God, there's aliens. And, you know, like the Pope has told us, the aliens have already come. They've been here many times. They're coming again. And when they come, we better be ready for the fact, and this is what Pope Francis said, that they may have a Jesus Christ higher than our Jesus Christ. They may have a totally different Messiah, and we have to be ready to accept that. Okay, that is sheerest doubt, sheerest hatred, and the sheerest fear you can have. Now, what solves those problems? Faith solves the problem of doubt. Love solves the problem of hatred. And hope solves the problem of fear. So you have faith, love, and hope. And they're in the realms of your thinking, feeling, and willing. When you have fear in your astral body, you need faith to overcome it. Well, how are you going to have faith? Blind faith? Or is it going to be from your direct experience with other spiritual beings, depending upon the level you're at? But anyway, you need to have faith. And then you're going to jump into fear. And you're going to be all worried about the future. But to begin with, you start off with doubt in your astral body. And that is the temptation of Lucifer. Lucifer wants to convince you that none of it is real. The only thing that's real is your own selfish desire. That's it. That's all Lucifer is going to ever give you, is for you to waller in your own personal desires, your astral body. But when the second temptation comes, it's really a temptation from Lucifer and Ahriman, and it's in the realm of the etheric. And love is the answer to the etheric, just like faith is the answer to the astral body. So if you have love, then you can overcome the temptation of Lucifer, selfishness, and Ahriman, vicious selfishness, and you can have love, and you can love the other person. You can listen to them. You can say to the UFO that you think you're seeing, hey, we're a great place. Come on down. I'd like to meet you. I want to introduce you to my wife. You can be a nice guy. You can love an alien. Why wouldn't you love an alien? Okay. What's going to cause you to hate an alien just because they flew through the sky? As Tyler said last time, when the Indians, the Aboriginal Indians of South America, saw the conquistadors coming, what did they say? They flew out of the sky. Why? Because they had sails. The sails were billowed with air. They were flying through the air. They were flying on the water. They didn't understand that. They were in spaceships. And throughout all the Aboriginal cultures, when the new invading culture, whether it be ancient India with the Brahmins, whether it be the Persians and basically Zarathustra and the followers of Zarathustra, or whether it be Mesopotamia and the Anunnaki, or whether it be the Toltecs and the beings who came out of the sky, and then they draw these pictures of them. It's all the same. It's because you don't understand the mechanism by which they arrived. Therefore, you then go into cognitive dissonance, you go into doubt and fear, and you think this is something extraordinary, when in fact it's part of natural evolution. And then if you have, that's in your etheric body. Then if you have the temptation in your physical body, it's fear, because you don't know what's going to happen with the UFO. If an angel comes and you drop to the ground and put your face in the dirt where it belongs, because you can't look at an angel because you're not worthy enough to. First off, you don't have it's not with your eyes, it's super sensible organs, and you're not evolved enough to be able to communicate with an angel. Or when they showed up, you'd know their language and you'd be able to communicate with them, and you wouldn't be afraid. You would, in fact, have hope. Thank you, heaven. An angel showed up. This is, you're here to help my salvation. You're here to help me. You're here to heal me. You're here to, you'd have all that. You'd have faith. You'd have love. You'd have hope, instead of fear, instead of doubt, hatred, and fear. Now, we should recognize this. Where do these temptations happen? In the Bible. And when Jesus was baptized and he heard the voice of God say, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased," and he went through, really, it's a shock to have the baptism, full immersion baptism. And he went through the shock and he woke up, and his ego woke up at that point. And he said, "I have to go to the desert." Immediately. First thing he said is, "Holy moly, there's a bunch of demons in my body. I have to get rid of them. I'm going to go and fast and pray and go into the desert." And so he went into the desert, and what happened? 3 different demons, or 3 temptations happened. Different demons. One demon crops up and says, now there's 3 different versions in the 3 gospels, but I'm going to mix them up, and for my own purposes, I'm going to align them in the way that I'd like to make my point. So Steiner says most of this, but not exactly the same way. So when Lucifer shows up to take Christ to the highest pinnacle of the temple, and he says, "Throw yourself off and test God, and your angels will come to save you." What does Christ say? No, it's sinful to test God. So Lucifer was saying, "Don't you doubt? Don't you doubt? Don't you doubt?" And Christ says, "No, I don't doubt. I have perfect faith." And so that temptation was overcome instantaneously. So Lucifer is very easily overcome. Stop being selfish. But it's not so easy, because you fall asleep, and then you go into dreams, and then you go into a trance, and pretty soon you're not even in control of your own thinking. And then a second temptation happened, where a demon of sorts, a devil, a Satan, showed up. Rudolf Steiner would say it was Lucifer and Ahriman. And a dual temptation happened at once. They took him to a high mountain and said, "You see all this? You can have it all. We can put you in command of it all. You will be the ruler of the world." Now, what is that? Of course, that's selfishness, but it's also, it's maniacal. It's evil. If you want to have control over the whole world, that's your selfishness gone insane. And no one's ever going to get that. So the fact that they were offering this to Christ, of course, Christ didn't have hatred to want to have a hegemony of the world. Christ didn't come to conquer the world in that militant manner. He came to conquer it with love. And so he was able to conquer that temptation. Same exact temptations each of you are going to have when you reach the threshold, or when you have an experience that is so extraordinary, like seeing an angel or an archangel or an archai or an elemental being or seeing a UFO. So a lot of people in the comments of these videos say, yes, this, when I was 3, this happened, when I was 7, and they tell us all these experiences, and they're really quite interesting, because those are really the moments that we woke up. So in the third temptation, that is the one that Christ really couldn't conquer at that time. And that's what's important to understand. At that time, why didn't, Christ, who was hungry, 40 days of fasting, when the devil said, turn this stone into bread, what did Christ say? Man does not live by bread alone. But what was he really saying? He was saying, I am with you until the end. I am the Alpha, the Omega. I'm here till the end. I'm here until minerals are dissolved. I'm here till rocks become food. Rudolf Steiner says in the future, our food will be nothing but minerals, which really alchemically is what creates the fire in your body. And so it's the fire in your body that is really the nutrition, both for the spiritual world and for yourself. So Christ did not conquer the physical yet, because the physical still has to go on for some time. So when it comes down to it, can the demon conquer someone who's possessed? No, never can. Not unless the person, incarnation after incarnation, falls back again and again and again. Why? Because the physical belongs to Ahriman. Christ said, my Father's kingdom is not of this world. It's a different kind of a place. It's a spiritual place. You can't carry your garbage into the spiritual world. So when you come to a threshold experience, you're going to meet your own 3 demons. And you are responsible for, as they'd say, casting them out. But I would call them just taming them, suppressing them, and then using that energy for good purposes. So everyone, this shocked a friend of mine when I just told him this. Everyone's got 3 major demons in you, and probably a whole lot more. And so when I would see people in the old days, and I'd look at them clairvoyantly, they may be controlled by Lucifer, and they're up in their head, and they're just completely prideful, selfish pigs. Can you not see that on somebody's face? Can you not see that in their walk? Can you not hear that in their voice? So the image of just looking at them would be able to tell you a ton. And then when they spoke, the music of their speech, the warmth of their speech would tell you all about their etheric body, their habits. And your habits are what create your own religion. It's what create who you are. So you can think that you're in control with your mind, but you're not. You're in control with your habits. And then you could look even further into the physical body and see whether or not they were controlled by Ahriman, whether or not they were giving their life over to the service of subnature instead of supernature. And so basically it's all the same thing. And this is why I was saying to John earlier, it's one and the same. It's no different to me. Going to the threshold, I have to tame my demons, or I'm not going to be able to help anybody. And so if a part of them is stuck across the threshold because they're possessed, then if I go to the threshold and I take my demons with me, it's going to be a really bad scenario, okay? And the same thing is true with anything, because what is an exorcism? It's love. And when you love another person, then you wake up on them. You don't go to sleep on them. You consider them to be a source of nourishment, and you're trying to nourish them, and you have faith in them, and you have love for them, and you have hope for the future. Once you have that, you can conquer any demon.
That was wonderful. Your paragraphs are even longer than mine. So in Latin, you could say, cogito caput mortuum terribilis est. I perceive that the dead head is terrible. And so when we pursue our realm of thinking in which we live on a day-to-day basis, we're pursuing something that's a corpse of reality. Riddle Steiner is very adamant about that on many occasions. And so, but you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that this abstract dead thinking is unable to put it together in a way that represents the greater reality, that it doesn't have the tools. It's like trying to solve a problem in calculus using just arithmetic. I mean, that's really tough going. And so when you get into this, for example, if we go and make a shift, I did a show, the last show I did on my channel, we were dealing with the radiance of the Eucharist. And if you look in the Grail legend, you see that in the story it says that the Grail Knights go to the Grail Castle and that they're given life through looking upon the Grail. Well, what is that? You know, and you go where Rudolf Steiner says that around the 4th century, around 333, that there was a shift in the way in which mankind looked upon the Eucharist, and that it became something that they would argue over the significance of starting from that point in time, because it was shifting, it was getting far enough along into the intellectual soul period that it got into this realm of abstraction. And it's through that abstraction that we go into that realm of fear. But in the lodges of St. John, the tradition of the Templars and Freemasons, they talk about the three pillars that are in the temple, and they have to do with wisdom, strength, and beauty. And that's what we're talking about here. It's about a development of character. And through developing one's character, one develops one's capacity to be able to hold a wholesome relationship with these things. So what does that mean? Well, you got the wisdom, that's that realm of doubt. And then you've got fear, that's the realm of strength, wisdom, strength, and beauty. And what is that realm of beauty? Well, its inverse is hatred. So you have that wisdom, strength, and beauty as the harmonious working of the same realms that are producing the doubt, the fear, and the anger. And see, so it's that transformation that takes place. But in doing that transformation in one's consciousness, one actually causes a certain healing process to unfold. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear. He says that the real significance of the Eucharist, and I paraphrase, but that it's healing. And that in the Grail story, when the Grail Knights go to the Grail Castle and they look upon the Grail, they become healed. And so what does that mean? Well, all of the early Christian groups were about healing and exorcism. That's what they did. But coming up to the 4th century, that went into a shift where it became more moving toward that whole legalistic approach that happened through the church. And Rudolf Steiner is also very adamant about that. I can quote him, but I've quoted it before, is that, basically that the church did a job on Christianity, and that they essentially lost that understanding that was so natural for somebody who had the ability to see auras. Once they couldn't see auras, then it just became an abstraction.
In the astral body, Lucifer is going to show you images. In the etheric body, Ahriman is going to, well, first off, let's say in the astral body, the Lucifer will show you bad images. The angels will show you good images. In the etheric body, the archangels are going to show you, or going to play for you, music. You're going to hear sound. And the the demons, Ahriman's demons, you're going to hear the din of hell. Okay. And then in your physical body, the archai are going to bring forth, because these are the ethers, and the ether called life ether is actually called the word. So you have Lucifer bringing images, Ahriman bringing sound, and the asuras bringing the word. But all those are negative, or otherwise you have angels, archangels, and archai bringing these things to you. So when you approach the threshold, are you going to be scared? What if the threshold said, you may step across now? Would you? When I encountered ball lightning one time, it was as big as a house, and I was running after it, and I was going to jump in it because I thought that was like connecting with the spiritual beings. Why not? So it incinerates me. So what? I was happy to do it. So would I be afraid? No, I wasn't afraid. So I didn't doubt. I had no doubt I'd be fine, even if ball lightning ate me up. So what? I'm like Empedocles. I when I was in Hawaii, I seriously considered throwing myself into the volcano and just vaporizing and saying, good, now I've merged. But that would have been merging with elemental beings, not hierarchical beings. That's what I'm talking about. You can go down or you can go up. And so when it comes to it, the body and the blood of the Eucharist coming from that chalice is your heart. And that's why it's called the inexhaustible chalice of love. And that's what Eucharist is. But what are you doing? You're taking the old blood mysteries and the sacrifice mysteries of sacrificing the physical and the blood. And it's the blood that's the big deal, because that's where your ego is for a human being. But you'd offer up animals, or in the past, they offered up humans. So that's the body, the blood, and the consciousness, right? Well, those are the same three realms: the body, the blood, the consciousness, angels, archangels, archai. And what is Christ telling you? That he went across the threshold consciously and redeemed both sides. How? By giving up of his body, his blood, and his consciousness. So he died, right? And then conquered death. And that's the big issue. That's what it's all about. You don't need to make death sacrifices anymore with body and blood. You can do it with the bread and the wine. But when you get one across the threshold, you have to give up of your body, your blood, and your consciousness. There's no other way. You have to get rid of your demons, your double, your doppelganger. You have three, and those are the three beasts you'll see in the Bardo. Those are the fierce demons that the Tibetans always display. And you must face them and you must conquer them, because you can't carry your fierceness, you can't carry the evil that is in your body, your blood, and your consciousness, or your physical, etheric, astral body. You can't carry that across the threshold. And so that's what we're being told in the Eucharist. And sorry I missed that conversation. I was busy the other day, but I'm going to join with you in the next one after I listen to your talk with Joe. And that is a conversation that is endless. If you go to our book, the History of the Grail Queens, I think it's called. I can't remember the name of all of our books, but the Grail Queens, which again, they're free. You can get them PDF. You will find the description of all of this in relationship to the Eucharist, also in relationship to different religious paths and traditions. And they're very, 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 very similar. It's absolutely shocking that the highest level of Tibetan Buddhism, the goddess Vajrayogini, is chopping up her body, drinking her own blood, and turning her consciousness into fire. Well, isn't that literally the mission of Christianity? And so it's the same thing. And why? Because when you cross the threshold, you're going to have to do that. And that's what people don't understand. They think, being a psychic's really cool, or that. No, it's not cool. The ones who read the astral images, which is nothing but Lucifer telling your selfishness. It's just your selfishness, just spouting. That's nothing. But you still have to make a sacrifice for that. But if you really want to see into someone's etheric or physical body, it's the most terrifying thing you can ever imagine. Okay? Because you're going to see their demons. Even if they don't know they have the demons, you will see their demons. Same thing with an exorcism. You have to be willing to put your physical body, your etheric, your astral body, your ego. Your ego has to be given over to Christ, or none of it will work. And then once that's happened, it's just like you've heard of people who can just listen to you, like a priest. You can hear a priest can hear a confession, right? And then you're healed. What's that about? That's because they didn't go to sleep when they were telling you when the sinner was telling the priest their sins. They didn't go to sleep. They mitigated that for you, and then they told you go do some penance. And if you did really bad sins, you'd have to go do fasting and prayer for a long time, and then maybe you'll be able to again approach the threshold. But when you're looking at the Eucharist, you are looking across the threshold into the spiritual world. You're watching the Holy Spirit, the future, come into the present. And because Christ in the past has redeemed you and basically paid the ransom for your spirit, then you have a chance to literally look across the threshold. When I was young, every single Eucharist, I saw angels. I thought everybody did, but they don't.
Yes, and that's the key. In an article by Alfred Heidenreich, he talks about how Rudolf Steiner had said that he traveled around to all various churches throughout Europe, and he would go and he would attend the Mass and the Eucharist. And he said it was only in a few places in Italy that he could really find that miraculous event that the Eucharist was meant to be was really taking place. Not that there's nothing happening, and in some of the others, because of the lack of proper consciousness and preparedness, the inverse could be happening even. But that in being able to look at that, because remember, Rudolf Steiner is always talking about the mystery of Golgotha. Well, what is Golgotha? It means place of the skull, right? Calvarium, Calvary. That's that realm in which we're crucified between two thieves, or a thief and a murderer, really. But yet Christ turns to the thief and he says, "You shall be with me today with my Father in heaven." But the other, the murderer, he was unable to resolve that for him at that time because he didn't have that repentance, right? That the other fellow had. So you have to be able to give it up. It's about offering up in the form of service through moral imagination, moral inspiration, and moral intuition. And there's a great meditation, I've given it, but it was a long time ago. And but I'm going to share this with you because Rudolf Steiner had said that had the story of Moses with the golden calf, had that not happened in the way that Moses dealt with it, that the mystery of Golgotha could not have happened. And so you have this whole mystery with Moses in that he was instructed by Jehovah to take the Israelites and go to the promised land. But Moses took a bunch of other people with him too. And they're called the mixed multitude in Kabbalah. In Hebrew, it's Erev Rav. And they were like the troublemakers. And so when Moses goes to Mount Sinai, he comes back and they're worshiping the golden calf. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of what Rudolf Steiner said about that. This is from March 22nd, 1912 in Berlin. Rudolf Steiner says, and I quote, our occult exercises are supposed to bring us to imaginative knowledge. Not so long ago, they had imaginations that could be understood by any pupil without further explanation. Today, such imaginations must be explained in words because very few esoterics would be able to understand them by themselves. An imagination will now be given that's useful for any esoteric who has the feeling he's not making any progress in spite of his efforts. The pupil should imagine that his teacher or master is standing before him in the shape of Moses, and that the latter asks him, "So, you'd like to know why you're not getting ahead on the esoteric path?" Yes, I'll tell you why. It's because you worship the golden calf. Then the pupil sees the golden calf next to Moses. The latter lets fire come up from the earth that consumes the golden calf and turns it to powder. He throws this powder into some clear water and gives the mixture to the pupil to drink. A few centuries ago, any esoteric would have been able to understand this image. But now it must be explained as follows. When we go back into our memory, we get to a point to where our memories stop and ego consciousness began. What lies before that is what we made out of ourselves in previous incarnations and brought into this one. That's the golden calf that we worship without realizing it, our sheath nature. The pupil should now replace the image of the golden calf with the image of what he was as a child before he had an ego consciousness. He becomes fully aware that what he feels is his ego is just a luciferic effect. For ordinary consciousness is based on memory, and memory is a luciferic force, since it's Lucifer's task to carry the past over into the present. If one strips oneself of what one has through ego consciousness, then what remains is what we brought with us from other lives. Some people may feel that it's hard to have to think of themselves like that, but we won't be prepared to meet the guardian of the threshold without strict concepts like that. Then the pupil should imagine that fire burns the child's form that he is. He's become a little bigger since then, but basically it's still the same sheath man that the child was, except that the illusion of an ego has been added. He sees how the form turns to powder, and this becomes a strong awareness that all parts of this physical, etheric, and astral sheaths must become as indifferent to him as a pile of ashes, as indifferent as clay is for a sculptor before he's made something out of it. He must think away his physical body and its outer shape, his etheric body with its memory, his astral body with its sympathies and antipathies, or think they are a pile of ashes. One might not be able to put this into practice right away. It doesn't mean that one should suddenly hug someone you dislike, but when we carry out this imagination as an exercise, we must be able to get rid of all antipathies, and the powder is thrown into the pure water of divine substance the way it was before the luciferic force worked on it. This is how the sheath nature is to be sacrificed and the divine substance is to be given back. But esoteric also arrives at the insight that everything that is now only a pile of dust for him was formed out of the spirit. His body's shape was sculpted by the spirit. The spirit made him into what he is now as form. And we should take what the spirit is made out of us back into ourselves. We should drink the water again in which the dust was dissolved. Then we have it pure after the golden calf was burned, pulverized, and dissolved. If we do this, we'll feel that a whole place in us seems to become empty. It's the place where the ego usually is. But we feel that this is getting empty when one can either become a Buddhist or go into a region for which a man should feel that he's too worthy, into nirvana, into an extraterrestrial sphere, or one can arrive at a new awareness of the Christ impulse and can feel it stream into the place of our ego that has become empty. Christ would have never been able to come to earth among the Hebrew people if Moses hadn't destroyed the golden calf, thrown it into water, and given it to Israel's children to drink. This doesn't mean that one should do this imagination every day, but maybe every 3 or 4 weeks. It's basically just another clarification of our Rosicrucian verse. Ex Deo nacimur, out of God we are born. In Christo morimur, in Christ we die. Per spiritum sanctum revivissimus, through the Holy Spirit we are resurrected.
Wonderful, wonderful quote. It It touched on so many of the things we've been talking about. It's ridiculous.
That's why I know I've read it before, but it really puts a bow on it for all the things that we're addressing. Because once you, that's what we were talking about earlier with Joe, is that when you get down to the real nexus of what spiritual science is attempting to do, it's attempting to distribute food for the development of the Jupiter evolution. That's what our job is right now. We have to create things that are worthy of moving into the future.
Yes, and the calf, the golden calf, of course, is referring to the previous age of Taurus and the worship of the great bull in the sky. You know, like Gilgamesh and Ibani, that whole story of wrestling with the great bull. So that's the past. And so what was happening is when it's turned golden, it's bringing the past into the present and making it like the sun, because that the gold represents the sun. It represents your heart. So when he had them drink the gold, that strengthened their heart. There are now medicaments that Rudolf Steiner makes out of homeopathic gold that you can take for your heart. And the other point that is so powerful that you made there, when you're talking about the Eucharist, you're talking about a chalice that overflows eternally. It's the inexhaustible chalice. It's the heart. It's the fact that your heart can let inexhaustible love flow through it. And it's not you. You're not making the love. Love comes from the hierarchy of the cherubim, of the seraphim, and harmony from the cherubim, and willpower from the thrones. So most of the things that you think are yours aren't. And when you want to go into the past, yes, you go to idols. And this is the problem. You have to look at the idols that you worship. And you may not even know that you worship these idols, but I keep saying anything you do on a regular basis is your religion. It's as simple as that. Even eating. If eating is not sacred and you don't bless your food, then it's poison and you're killing yourself.
Yeah, and I could see where, because of the way this is headed, we probably should develop the ideas regarding the temperaments in a future episode. So let's make a mental note of that, because so much of what arises from people is driven by their personal temperament, which is really, that has to do with the relationship to their guardian angel, very specifically.
Yes, and to the elements, to warmth, light, sound, and life, or fire, earth, water, air, or to the elemental beings, or to what it is that you give yourself over to. If you drink a lot of alcohol, you have evil undines in you. Sorry, you've invited in a bunch of demons. If you're smoking cigarettes, then you've invited demons of the air. You've invited sylphs in, negative, terrible ones. If you put things into your bloodstream, like bad shots and stuff like that, or bad medicines, you're trying to annihilate your own ego. And these are literally demonic beings. They're idols now, because we worship what the doctors tell us. We worship science. We worship the food. We worship our convenience. We worship our machines. But nobody wants to tell you that you're worshiping them. So when Moses comes forth and says, you know, there's a law written on your heart, the 10 commandments, or just the one commandment, the golden rule, and you know it and you're ignoring it, and you've gone back into the past to let your ego be ruled by an idol. So you're letting your ego be ruled by the idol of your digital machines, of your addiction to sex, of your hedonistic desires. That's what it's all about. Those are the demons we have to get out. And the way to do that is to empty your heart, and then you ask higher beings to come in. And they love to come in because angels love moral imagination. It's their food. Archangels love the harmony of the spheres. They love it when we make beautiful music. They love to hear the lilting sound of a mother cooing to her child. That's the archangels are looking at moral inspiration there, and the beings of time, the moral intuitions. They love when someone rises up and can develop new icons, new images, new light motifs that we can follow into the future, so that we do not worship the old idols, but that we understand that we don't need to worship anything more than Christ sitting in the throne of your heart, or Christ being that holy grail that is overflowing with love. Now, yes.
Yeah, well, you could take it in described in a simple imagination that was used so often in the cathedrals and in the Christian lore of Europe, because they show the Archangel Gabriel as the archangel of the Annunciation, right? And they always show him with a lily. Well, what's up with the lily? The lily's that's the astral, right? And so that what the purification of the astral brings one to the fragrant realm of the astral. And so great saints, you know, they talk about how they exuded the smell of flowers even after their death, for example. So it's that purification of the astral of somebody that's typified by someone like St. Francis of Assisi, who could communicate with the animals, and the wolf was bothering the village, and Francis goes and has a heart-to-heart with the wolf, and the wolf takes off. You know, it's like, what is that? I mean, that's a very, very real thing, Rudolf Steiner says. And so you have that, and then, okay, so what's the rose, the counterpart? Well, there's the 6-petaled lily, and there's the 5-petaled rose, and that 5, that's the etheric body. And so that's what your pentagon is, except that a plant is like a human being upside down. So the root is the head, right? And so then you go up, and then you have the leaves. That's like the breathing realm. And then you have the regenerative aspect of flowers is in the flowers. You know, that's where the reproductive process is. So it's like a human being upside down. But it's, again, that rose is key. But don't forget that on the rose, there's thorns.
That's for sure. Now, as we talk about the very thin veil between one kingdom and another, whether it be mineral, plant, animal, human, or angel, or archangel, we now can see across the threshold. So you can start to see angels that are partially human. They're fallen beings, but you can see them. And so you can literally start to see evil come into human beings. You can also see humans go across that threshold and start to become angels. And so you can meet someone like a Janet McGavin, who we've talked about before. She was like an angel. I never heard anything out of her mouth that wasn't just as sweet as honey. She's just a. So there are people who are angelic, right?
Dorothy McLean from
Yeah,
Finmore.
exactly.
Like,
who was a friend of mine and friend of yours, came to Detroit, came to see me in Hawaii, and she saw these elemental beings. They could see it, and so could Janet McGavin. They could see across the threshold. And this is the thing. Now we're being pulled across the threshold. So people look everywhere, and what do they see? They see themselves. So they may see their demons. They may see fear, doubt, and hatred. They may see all this negative stuff. But at the same time, they could also see the crossing over of the spiritual world into the physical world. And so now we have superhuman beings, from Steiner tells us, from Venus, Mercury, and Vulcan, who are here to help us. And they're here to help us in every way in our spiritual path and development. So we can also see that some humans are going backwards. And you can look at them, and on their face now and in the future, even more pronounced, they look like the animals that they act like. So the humans are dipping back into the animal, and the animal is dipping back into the plant. We now have, we're creating sentient plants. We're creating, we take elements from an animal and put it into a plant. We take elements from a plant and put it into an animal. We cross over all kinds of things, because it's just like the experimentation between humans and animals during Atlantis. Now we've taken that much further. We've taken it to humans are now being drawn into the plant realm. And then the plant, it is pulled down. It can go up towards the animal, or it can go into the mineral. So now you also have minerals going into the plant. That's silicon. That is the metal and mineral that is in your computer. And what has happened? We have animated it. It looks like it has the capacity of life that is found in a plant. And in some capacities, it looks as if it is an animal. When they say AI, which are really subroutines, that is the accumulation of a tremendous amount of human work. But it also makes the computer look as if it's living and sentient. And then we have the mineral realm going even further into subnature, into the past elemental kingdoms. And then you get into some amazing evil. That is the realm of the eighth sphere, where we're pulling human thinking, feeling, and willing into the realm of animal, plant, and mineral, and even further into subnature. And that's the problem. That's why people do enter into being possessed, because they're no longer human, they're no longer animal or a plant, or a mineral. They have actually become like a nature spirit that has been freed from the physical realm, but also that howls like crazy beings from hell. You can hear these beings, and they're screaming and yelling in between here and the moon. And you can also hear the angels between here and the moon and throughout the other planets, called the music of the spheres. So these images, these sounds, and the words that come will tell you, they'll come out of you, and they will then define what it is that you're perceiving, whether it be a UFO, an angel, or an elemental being.
Yes, it's that. And again, to go back to this wisdom, strength, and beauty, the three pillars in the temple of the Templar Masons, and that you have the wisdom with the Jupiter chakra, the 2-petal lotus, and then you have the 16-petal lotus of the throat, which is Mars, and then you have the 12-petal lotus of the heart, which is the sun. And that's the point at which we want to leave this dialogue. It's a wonderful story, and it's unfolding so gracefully. And I want to thank Tyla for leading us down this pathway. But that's the radiance of the Eucharist and the Holy Grail.